My 4-year-old son is $15,000 in debt because his own father stole his identity to buy a luxury yacht while claiming he was too poor to pay for antibiotics. I am currently holding the receipt for $52,000 in cash that my ex-husband, Caleb, spent 3 days ago, and I feel like I am going to vomit. This is the same man who stood in family court and swore he was homeless to avoid paying child support. This is the man who told me I was a bad mother for asking for $20 for medicine. But the truth is far darker than just a deadbeat dad. He has been using our toddler's social security number to fund a secret life of fine dining and designer clothes while destroying my child's future before it has even begun. He knows I found out, and now he is threatening to send me to federal prison using tax documents he forced me to sign years ago if I dare to go to the police. I am trapped in a nightmare where the man I once loved is holding a gun to my head, demanding I let him ruin our son, or else he will take my freedom. I am staring at the phone, terrified that the next call will be the police coming to arrest me for crimes I did not commit. I am alone. I am broke, and I am fighting a monster. What would you do if saving your child meant risking your own freedom? My name is Zoe Miller. I am 34 years old, though the dark circles under my eyes often argue that I have lived a century. I am a mother, a waitress, a freelance copywriter, and a professional juggler of overdue bills. I live in a drafty, 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of Chicago, where the winter wind off Lake Michigan screams against the windows like a creditor demanding payment. It was 2 a.m. when I finally sat down at my small kitchen table. The only light came from the street lamp outside, casting long, skeletal shadows across the linoleum floor. I emptied the pockets of my apron, quarters, dimmes, crumpled $1 bills. The smell of stale coffee and diner grease clung to my hair, a perfume I could never quite scrub away. I began to count. $42. That was it. That was the grand total of an 8-hour shift on a slow Tuesday night. I stared at the small pile of cash. My chest tightened, a familiar sensation that sat somewhere between panic and nausea. This was supposed to be the grocery money for the week. It was supposed to cover the milk, the eggs, and maybe, just maybe, a small treat for Leo, my son, my world. I looked toward the hallway where his bedroom door stood slightly ajar. He was 4 years old, a bundle of energy and innocent questions that I was finding harder and harder to answer. He was sleeping now, or so I hoped. For the last 2 years, this had been my life, a constant, breathless sprint just to stay in the same place. People tell you that leaving a toxic marriage is the hard part, that once you sign the papers, the clouds part and the sun shines. They do not tell you about the aftermath. They do not tell you about the financial ruin that follows when you leave a man who knows how to hide money better than he knows how to love his own child. I pushed the money into an envelope marked groceries and rubbed my temples. Everything was quiet. It was a fragile, terrifying silence. In this apartment, silence usually meant that nothing had broken yet, that no new crisis had reared its ugly head. It was a peace I knew was counterfeit, but I clung to it anyway. Then I heard it, a cough, not a simple clearing of the throat, but a wet, heavy hacking sound that rattled from the other room. I was out of my chair before the second cough hit the air. I rushed into Leo's room. The air was thick and warm. He was tangled in his Spider-Man sheets. His small face flushed a deep, alarming crimson. I placed my hand on his forehead. He was burning up. "Mommy," he whimpered, his voice raspy and thin. My ears hurt. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what this was. Another ear infection. It was the third one this winter. I pulled him into my arms, rocking him as he cried, his little body trembling against mine. I whispered lies into his hair. I told him it would be okay. I told him the pain would stop, but my mind was already racing, doing the math that never added up. The doctor's visit would require a copay. The antibiotics would cost money, even with the state-subsidized insurance I had fought tooth and nail to get. And then there was the rent, due in 3 days. I settled Leo back down with a dose of generic children's pain reliever that was dangerously low in the bottle. I walked back to the kitchen, my hands shaking, not from the cold, but from the humiliation of what I had to do next. I picked up my phone. I opened the message thread with Caleb. Caleb Vance, my ex-husband, the father of my child, the man who wore tailored suits and drove a German sedan while I counted quarters on a kitchen table. I typed the message, my thumbs heavy. Leo has a high fever and another ear infection. I need $40 for the copay and medicine. Please. Caleb. He is in pain. I hit send. I stared at the screen, watching the minutes tick by. It was late, but I knew Caleb was awake. Caleb was a creature of the night, always hustling, always networking, always spinning some new web. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The silence of the apartment felt heavier now, suffocating. Finally, the phone buzzed. A notification from the bank popped up. A transfer had been received. $20. I stared at the number. $20. Half of what I asked for. Half of what his son needed. Then came the text message. Sent 20. Do not use this to go get a manicure. Maybe if you managed your tips better, you would not have to beg me every time the kid sneezes. I felt the blood rush to my face, a hot wave of shame and fury. I looked down at my hands. My nails were bitten to the quick, the skin around them dry and cracked from washing dishes and scrubbing tables. A manicure? I had not stepped foot in a salon in 3 years. He knew that. He knew exactly which buttons to push to make me feel small, to make me feel like a failure of a mother. It was his specialty. Gaslighting was not just a tactic for Caleb. It was his native language. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall. I wanted to scream until my throat bled, but I could not. I could not wake Leo. I could not let the neighbors hear. Instead, I swallowed the rage. It tasted bitter, like bile. I took a deep breath and opened Instagram. I told myself I would not do this anymore. I told myself that pain shopping would only lead to more misery. But I had to know. I had to know where he was while he was sending me $20 in insults. I tapped on his profile. It was public. Of course, Caleb loved an audience. There was a new story, posted just 40 minutes ago. The photo was dimly lit, oozing expensive ambiance. A table covered in white linen, a bottle of wine with a label I recognized as costing more than my monthly electric bill, a massive, perfectly seared prime rib steak sat in the center of the plate, garnished with truffle shavings. The caption read, "Closing deals and living the dream. New beginnings. #hustle, #blessed, #the good life." He was at the Capitol Grill downtown. I knew that lighting. I knew those plates. He was eating a dinner that cost $200 while his son burned with fever a few miles away. My eyes drifted to the corner of the photo. There, resting on the edge of the table, was a woman's hand, manicured, slender, resting possessively near his wine glass. He was not just eating, he was dating. He was playing the role of the successful, wealthy entrepreneur, the misunderstood divorcee rebuilding his empire. I looked back at the $20 transfer notification. He claimed to the court that he was broke. He claimed his business went under. He claimed he was living on his mother's couch. And yet, here was the steak. Here was the wine. Something inside me shifted. It was not the usual sadness. It was something colder, sharper. For 2 years, I had accepted the scraps he threw me because I was afraid. I was afraid of his threats, afraid of his lawyers, afraid of the past coming back to haunt me. But looking at that steak and hearing Leo whimper in the other room, the fear began to recede, replaced by a clear, terrifying realization. He was not broke. He was stealing from his son. I took a screenshot of the photo. My finger hovered over the save button. This was a red flag. A bright, burning red flag waving in the middle of a blizzard. And for the first time, I did not look away. Saturday morning arrived with a cruelty that only a mother could understand. The apartment, usually a landscape of gray exhaustion, was transformed into a shrine of desperate hope. Leo had been awake since 6 o'clock in the morning. He sat by the front door on his small plastic stool, wearing a pair of oversized Mickey Mouse ears that listed slightly to the left. Beside him stood his little red suitcase, packed 3 days ago with enough enthusiasm to power the entire city grid. Caleb had promised. It was the phrase Leo had repeated all week like a sacred mantra. Daddy promised. Disney World, the Magic Kingdom. Caleb had told Leo he had bought the plane tickets. He had told him they would fly first class. He had painted a picture of a weekend so magical that even I, in my cynical bitterness, had wanted to believe him for the sake of our son. I stood in the kitchen, clutching a mug of lukewarm coffee, watching the clock on the stove. It was 9 o'clock. Caleb was supposed to be here at 8:30 to drive them to O'Hare International Airport. My stomach churned. I checked my phone for the 20th time. No calls, no texts. I walked over to Leo and smoothed his hair. He looked up at me, his eyes bright and trusting. He is coming, right, Mommy? Leo asked, adjusting his ears. He is probably just stuck in traffic. Baby, I lead. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I went back to the kitchen and dialed Caleb's number. It rang once, twice, then it went straight to voicemail. That smooth, confident voice I once loved filled my ear. You have reached Caleb Vance. I am currently closing a deal. Leave a message. I hung up. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The silence of the apartment felt heavier now, suffocating. Finally, at 9:45, my phone buzzed. It was not a call. It was a text. Of course it was a text. Cowards do not make phone calls. Something huge came up. Investors flying in from New York cannot make the trip. Tell the kid we will do it next month. Do not make a scene. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. He was not coming. There were no tickets. There were no trip. It was all a performance. A dangling carrot to make him look like a hero without spending a dime or a minute of his time. I had to tell Leo. When I broke the news, the sound that came out of my son was not a cry. It was a wail of pure, unadulterated devastation. He threw his Mickey ears on the floor. He kicked the red suitcase. He collapsed into a heap of sobbing misery, asking why Daddy did not want him. I held him, rocking him back and forth on the cold floor, while my own panic began to set in. I was supposed to work a double shift at the diner starting at 11 o'clock. I had calculated that shift into my budget. It was essential, But I had no babysitter. My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, was out of town. Daycares were closed or full. I had counted on Caleb taking Leo for the weekend. With trembling fingers, I dialed the diner. "Mike?" I started, my voice shaking. "I am so sorry. My ex, Saoyudzing Holin, 2# is greater than he did not show up. I do not have childcare. I can not come in." There was a long, cold silence on the other end. "Zue," Mike said, his voice flat and devoid of sympathy. "This is the 3rd time this month you have had drama. I run a business, not a charity ward. You need to figure your life out. If you call out one more time on a weekend, do not bother coming back." The line went dead. I sat there, the threat hanging over me like a guillotine. I was one step away from losing the only income I had. By the afternoon, Leo had cried himself into an exhausted sleep. The apartment felt suffocating. I needed air. I needed to move. I strapped Leo into his car seat, telling him we were going for a drive to get ice cream. A poor consolation prize for the Magic Kingdom. I drove aimlessly toward the city center, the skyline of Chicago looming gray and majestic against the winter sky. I found myself driving down Michigan Avenue, the magnificent mile. It was a place I used to belong to, back before the divorce, back before the debt. Now, I felt like a ghost haunting my own past. Traffic was crawling. I stopped at a red light near a row of high-end luxury boutiques. I looked idly out the window, watching the rich tourists with their shopping bags, and then I saw it. Parked in the valet zone in front of a prestigious jewelry store was a sleek, black sedan. I knew that car. I knew the license plate. It was the company car Caleb claimed had been repossessed 6 months ago. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled my beat-up Honda over to the curb, ignoring the honking horns behind me. I watched. The glass doors of the jewelry store opened. Caleb walked out. He did not look like a man in the middle of a crisis with New York investors. He looked radiant. He was wearing a camel hair coat that I knew cost more than my car. He was laughing, his head thrown back in genuine amusement. Linked to his arm was a woman. She was young, perhaps 25. She had hair the color of spun gold and wore a white coat that would have been ruined if she ever had to take public transit. She was looking at him with total adoration, but it was what was in her hand that made the bile rise in my throat. She was holding a small, signature blue bag, the kind that held diamond earrings or a tennis bracelet. Caleb paused on the sidewalk. He leaned in and kissed her. A lingering kiss that he used to give me when he was trying to sell me on a lie. Then he opened the car door for her. The perfect gentleman. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. He had told me he had no money for the copay. He had told Leo he had to work. He had told the court he was destitute. Yet here he was, buying diamonds on the very day he was supposed to be taking his son to see Mickey Mouse. I wanted to get out of the car. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march over there and smash that blue bag into the pavement and show that girl exactly who Caleb Vance really was. The rage was a physical thing, hot and sharp, clawing at my throat. But I stayed in my seat. I stayed because of the fear that Caleb had carefully planted in my mind like a landmine. The papers, he would whisper whenever I got too bold. "Remember the tax documents you signed. Zooey, you are an accomplice. You go down with me." He had me. He knew I was terrified of losing Leo to the system if I was arrested. He knew I was weak. I watched the black sedan pull away into traffic, merging seamlessly into the stream of wealth and privilege, leaving me behind in the exhaust fumes. Leo stirred in the back seat. "Mommy?" Did we miss the turn for Disney World? He asked, his voice thick with sleep and confusion. No. Baby, I whispered, tears finally spilling over my lashes. We missed the turn a long time ago. I put the car in gear and drove away. But something inside me had cracked. The sadness was still there, but beneath it, something else was beginning to harden. I had seen the truth. Caleb was not broke. He was not busy. He was a liar. And for the first time, I realized that his lies were not just annoying. They were expensive, and I was the one paying the bill. The waiting room of the pediatric clinic smelled of rubbing alcohol and cherry-flavored lollipops, a sickly sweet combination that made my empty stomach turn. I sat on a vinyl chair that had a long tear down the middle, exposing the yellow foam beneath. Leo was asleep on my lap, his mouth slightly open, even in his sleep. His brow was furrowed. The pain never fully left him anymore. It was a shadow that followed us from the bedroom to the car to this fluorescent-lit purgatory. Dr. Evans called us back 20 minutes later. He was a kind man with tired eyes and a stethoscope that looked like a toy. He examined Leo's ears in silence, the otoscope casting a bright light into the infected canals. When he pulled back, his expression was grave. The antibiotics are not working. Sue, he said gently, the fluid buildup is severe. It is affecting his hearing. If we do not address this now, he could suffer permanent damage to his eardrum and speech development. He needs surgery, tympanostomy tubes. We need to drain the fluid and insert the tubes. I felt the blood drain from my face. Surgery? The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Okay, I stammered, smoothing Leo's hair. We will do it. Whatever he needs. I walked to the billing department with the leaden steps of a woman walking to the gallows. The billing coordinator, a woman named Sheila who looked at me over the rim of her glasses, tapped on her keyboard. Your insurance has a high deductible. Miss Miller, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. You have not met it for the year. The estimated out-of-pocket cost for the facility and the anesthesiologist is $3,500. We require half up front before we can schedule the procedure. $3,500. It might as well have been $3 million. I had $42 in my bank account. My credit cards were maxed out from the divorce lawyers. I stared at Sheila, fighting back the urge to vomit on her pristine desk. Ling. 2 hash is greater than I need to make a call. I whispered. I walked out to the parking lot. The winter wind whipped my hair across my face. I put Leo in his car seat and handed him my phone to watch cartoons, praying the distraction would buy me 10 minutes of sanity. I drove to the one place I swore I would never go again unless it was a matter of life and death. This was life and death. I drove to the park near the expensive gated community where Caleb's mother lived. Caleb claimed he was staying in her guest room, sleeping on a lumpy mattress, rebuilding his life from scratch. I texted him that it was an emergency regarding Leo. Surprisingly, he agreed to meet me at the park bench near the duck pond. When I arrived, he was already there. He was wearing a tracksuit, the kind that looked casual but cost more than my monthly rent. He was scrolling through his phone, a look of boredom etched on his face. What is it now? Zoo? He asked without looking up. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Leo needs surgery, I said, my voice trembling. He could lose his hearing. Caleb, the doctor said it is urgent. I need $3,000. I will pay the rest. Just Ling. 2 hashes greater than please. Help your son. Caleb finally looked at me. His eyes were cold, like polished stones. He let out a short, Derisive laugh. $3,000? You think I have $3,000 lying around? Look at me, Zui. I am unemployed. I am living with my mother. I am a victim of this economy, just like everyone else. I saw you, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. I saw you at the steakhouse. I saw you buying jewelry for that girl. Do not lie to me. His face changed instantly. The boredom vanished, replaced by a menacing sneer. He stood up and took a step toward me, invading my personal space. I instinctively shrank back. So you are stalking me now? Is that it? He hissed. You are pathetic. That dinner was a business meeting. That jewelry was a commission I was picking up for a client. You see what you want to see because you are obsessed with me. I am not obsessed, I shouted, tears stinging my eyes. I am trying to keep our son from going deaf. Lower your voice, he commanded, looking around to see if anyone was watching. You are unstable. Zhu, this is exactly why I'm documenting everything. The constant demands for money, the hysteria. I have already spoken to my lawyer. If you keep this up, I will file for full custody on the grounds of parental alienation. You are trying to turn Leo against me by making me look like the bad guy. The injustice of it choked me. He was the one abandoning his child, yet he was threatening to take him away. You would not dare, I whispered. You do not even want him. You missed his birthday. You missed Disney World. I am building a future for him. Caleb shouted back. And what do? You beg. You are a leech. Zhu, and let us not forget Sao Jinghao Ling, our Jinghao Dayu. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. The smell of expensive cologne and peppermint gum wafted over me. Let us not forget the tax returns from 2019. The ones you signed, the ones where we declared all those losses for the consulting firm. If I go down for fraud, Zui, you go down with me. You sign the papers. You are an accomplice. Do you think the judge will give custody to a convicted felon? I froze. The cold wind felt like it was cutting through my skin. That was his trump card. Years ago, when I was young and blindly in love, he had brought me stacks of documents. Just sign here. Babe, it is just business stuff. Trust me. And I had signed my name next to his on documents I did not understand. Documents that I now knew were filled with lies to the Internal Revenue Service. He saw the fear in my eyes and smiled. It was a triumphant, Krell, it smile, figure it out. Zoe, you are the mother. It is your job. He turned and walked away, leaving me standing alone by the frozen duck pond. I drove to the only other person who might help, Patricia Vance, Caleb's mother. Her house was a sprawling brick colonial that sat on a hill, overlooking the lesser houses of the suburb. I parked in the driveway and walked up the stone path. My heart was pounding. Patricia had always disliked me. She thought I was common. She thought I trapped her golden boy. But surely, she loved her grandson. Patricia opened the door. She was wearing a silk robe and holding a cup of tea. Her face was a mask of weary martyrdom. Zooey, she sighed. I am not feeling well today. My migraines are terrible. It is Leo. Patricia, I said, stepping into the foyer before she could close the door. He needs surgery. Caleb will not help. I have nowhere else to turn. Please. It is $3,000. I will pay you back every cent. Patricia led me into the living room. The furniture was covered in plastic, as if she were expecting a flood. The house was cold. She kept the thermostat low to save money, or so she claimed. Oh, Zoe, she said, sinking onto the sofa and clutching her chest. You think I have money? Caleb's father left me with nothing but debts. I am barely scraping by. That boy, Saoyutsing Hao, Ling. Tuhash is greater than Caleb tries so hard, but the world is against him. We are destitute. She looked around the room, which was filled with antique vases and Persian rugs. I do not have a penny to spare, she said, her voice trembling with practiced theatricality. I am so sorry for Leo, but maybe you should apply for Medicaid or a charity. The rejection hit me like a physical blow. They were all the same, mothers and sons, spinning webs of lies to protect their hoard. Can I use your restroom? I asked, feeling a wave of nausea. Of course, she said, waving a hand vaguely toward the back of the house. Just do not use the guest towels. I walked down the hallway. I passed the den, the room where Caleb's father used to smoke cigars. The door was slightly ajar. I do not know what made me stop. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the glint of sunlight hitting something on the heavy oak desk. I pushed the door open. The room was cluttered with boxes. Patricia was a hoarder of paperwork. Stacks of envelopes and files covered every surface, but right in the center of the desk, sitting on top of a pile, was a crisp, white document. I glanced back toward the living room. I could hear Patricia humming to herself. I stepped into the den. My heart beat so loud I thought it would alert the neighbors. I reached out and picked up the document. It was a sales contract, dated 3 days ago. Vessel purchase agreement. I scanned the lines, my eyes widening in disbelief. It was for a 28-foot Sea Ray Sundancer, a luxury recreational boat. The purchase price was listed clearly, $52,000, paid in full via cashier's check. My eyes darted to the buyer's name. I expected to see a stranger's name, or maybe a shell company, but there it was. Not Caleb Vance, purchaser, C. James Vance. Caleb's middle name was James, and the address listed for the purchaser, 142 Maple Drive, Patricia's address. This house, the room spun. I had to grab the edge of the desk to steady myself. They were not broke. They were buying yachts. Caleb had $52,000 in cash to buy a boat to impress his new girlfriend or his business partners. But he did not have $3,000 to save his son's hearing. And his mother, Saoyutsing Haling, Tuhash is greater than she knew. She was letting him use her address. She was hiding his assets. She was sitting in the other room pretending to be a poor widow while a receipt for a luxury boat sat on her desk. My hands shook violently. I fumbled for my phone and snapped 3 pictures of the document. I made sure to get the date, the price, and the signature, Caleb's signature, that distinct, arrogant scrawl I had seen 1,000 times. I put the paper back exactly where I found it. I walked out of the den. I walked into the bathroom and flushed the toilet, just to keep up the charade. Then I walked back into the living room. Patricia was still sipping her tea. Did you find everything all right? She asked innocently. Yes, Patricia, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. It was calm, too calm. It was the calm of a person who had just realized that the world was not just unfair, but evil. I understand. I continued. You have no money. I will figure it out. Thank you for your time. I walked out of that house. I walked to my car where my sick child was sleeping. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the photos on my phone. The tears did not come this time. The sadness was gone. It had been burned away by a white-hot fury that started in my stomach and spread to every nerve ending in my body. He thought he had me trapped. He thought I was weak. He thought the fear of those old tax papers would keep me silent forever. He was wrong. I started the engine. I was not just going to get the surgery money. I was going to take everything. The silence in my car did not last long. I was barely 2 blocks away from Patricia's sprawling colonial house when my phone began to buzz against the passenger seat. It vibrated violently, dancing across the upholstery like an angry hornet. I knew who it was before I even looked at the screen. I pressed the answer button and put it on speaker. I did not say hello. You have some nerve. Caleb's voice boomed through the car speakers. The smooth, charming tone he used for his investors was gone. This was the voice of the man who punched walls when he lost a video game. I know about the boat, Caleb, I said, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. I saw the contract, $52,000. You are lying to the court. You are lying to everyone. There was a pause on the other end, a heavy, breathing silence. Then, a low, dark chuckle that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. You think you are so smart. Do not you? Sue, you think finding a piece of paper changes anything? That boat is not in my name. It is a gift. It is a family asset. You cannot touch it. I have pictures. I countered, though my voice lacked the confidence I wanted it to have. Take them to court, he spat. See what happens. But let me tell you what is going to happen first. Since you want to play detective and harass my mother, I am done playing nice. I am resigning from the firm tomorrow. My foot wavered on the gas pedal. What? You heard me. I am quitting. Officially, as of tomorrow, I will have 0 income. I will work under the table. Cash only. No paper trail. No pay stubs for your lawyers to subpoena. I will be a ghost. Zoo. And do you know what the state guidelines for child support are for an unemployed man with no assets? 0. He paused, letting the threat sink in like poison. You will never see another dime from me. You want to fight? Fine. I will starve you out until you come crawling back begging me to stop. Good luck paying for those ear tubes now. The line went dead. I pulled over to the side of the road, my chest heaving. The sheer malice of it took my breath away. He was willing to destroy his own career, willing to live like a criminal, just to ensure his son got nothing. I could not go home. If I went home, I would curl up in a ball and never get up. I had to solve this. Leo was in pain. The surgery was scheduled for Thursday. I needed $3,500. I looked at the bank building across the street. First National. It was a long shot. My credit was ruined. A casualty of the divorce and the debts Caleb had racked up on our joint accounts before he left. But I had a job. I had a small, steady income. Maybe, just maybe, I could get a personal loan with a high interest rate. I did not care if I had to pay 20% interest. I would pay it for the rest of my life if I had to. I checked my face in the rearview mirror. I wiped the tears from my cheeks, pinched them to bring back some color, and walked into the bank. The air inside was cool and smelled of sanitizer and old money. I sat across from a loan officer named Mr. Henderson. He was a young man with a crisp blue suit and a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. I need a personal loan, I said, trying to sound professional. $3,500. It is for a medical emergency. Mr. Henderson nodded, tapping away at his computer. I can certainly take a look for you. Miss Miller, I just need your social security number and some basic information. I gave him the numbers. I watched his face as he stared at the screen. I saw the moment the smile faltered. I saw the slight furrow of his brow. He clicked his mouse a few times. Then he stopped. He looked at me, then back at the screen, then at me again. The professional veneer cracked, replaced by a look of genuine confusion. "Miss Miller," he said slowly, "I am afraid I cannot approve this loan. Your credit score is Ling, 2 hashes greater than well. It is significantly below the threshold, but that is not the only issue." "I know," I said quickly, desperation creeping into my voice. "I know about the joint cards. My ex-husband ran them up, but I am paying them off. I have a job at the diner. I do freelance writing. I can show you my pay stubs." "No, that is not it," he interrupted. He turned the monitor slightly away from me. "A habit of privacy." But then he hesitated. "Miss Miller, when I pulled your file, it flagged an association with another profile, a dependent, Leo Vance. Is that your son?" "Yes," I said, my heart skipping a beat. "He is 4 years old." "Why?" Mr. Henderson looked uncomfortable. He cleared his throat. "It appears there is a considerable amount of debt linked to his social security number." The room seemed to tilt. The sounds of the bank, the hum of the air conditioner, the murmur of tellers faded into a dull roar. "What?" I whispered. "That is impossible. He is a baby. He is 4. He does not have a credit card." The officer turned the screen fully toward me. There, on the glowing monitor, was a list. Discover card. Balance, $5,000. Capital One. Balance, $4,200. Chase Sapphire. Balance, $6,000. Total debt, $15,200. The accounts had been opened 18 months ago, right around the time Caleb moved out, right around the time he claimed he was broke. Someone used his social security number to open these accounts. Mr. Henderson said quietly, "They are all maxed out. They are in default." I stared at the numbers. They blurred together. It was not a stranger. It was not a hacker from halfway across the world. I knew exactly who had Leo's social security number. I knew who had the audacity to steal the future of a 4-year-old boy to fund his steak dinners and boat purchases. Ling. Dva. Caleb. He had stolen his own son's identity. I felt a scream building in my chest. A primal, animalistic sound that wanted to tear through the polite silence of the bank. I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle it. "Miss Miller, are you all right? Should I call the police?" Mr. Henderson asked, his voice alarmed. I stood up. My legs felt like jelly. "No," I choked out. "No police. Not yet." I grabbed my purse and stumbled out of the bank. The sunlight outside was blinding. I leaned against the brick wall of the building, gasping for air. Identity theft. It was a federal crime. It was a felony. If I reported him, he would go to prison. But the voice in my head, Caleb's voice, whispered the threat again. "You signed the tax papers. Zooey, you go down with me. Who will raise Leo then? Foster care?" He had checkmated me. He had destroyed my credit. He was starving me out. And now I knew he had destroyed my son's credit before the boy even learned to read. I slid down the wall until I was crouching on the sidewalk, burying my face in my hands. Passers-by stepped around me, ignoring the woman falling apart in public. I was trapped. I was completely, utterly trapped. And the worst part was, Caleb knew it. He had counted on it. He had bet on my fear. And he was winning. I sat in my car in the driveway of my apartment complex for an hour. The engine was off. The heat had dissipated long ago, leaving the interior freezing. but I could not bring myself to move. My body felt heavy, anchored to the seat by the crushing weight of the truth I had just learned. $15,000. My 4-year-old son was $15,000 in debt. I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the steering wheel. I could see Caleb's face, not the angry face he showed me, but the charming, smiling face he wore when he manipulated everyone else. I could see him filling out the credit card applications, typing in Leo's social security number, likely while sipping a glass of wine. Without a shred of guilt, he had mortgaged his own son's future to buy what? Dinners? Clothes? That boat? The fear that had paralyzed me for 2 years surged up again, choking me. It was a cold, slimy thing that lived in the pit of my stomach. If you report me, Zoo, I will release the tax documents. You signed them. You are a co-conspirator. You will go to federal prison. That was the narrative he had spun. I remembered that night in 2019. He had come home late, smelling of scotch and stress. He had thrown a stack of papers on the kitchen table. Sign these. He had said, the accountant needs them by morning or we lose the house. I had asked what they were. He had snapped at me. Just sign them. Zooey, do you want to be homeless? So I signed. I signed without reading. I signed because I trusted my husband. I signed because I was stupid. Now, those signatures were the bars of my cage. If I went to the police about the identity theft, Caleb would hand those tax returns to the Internal Revenue Service. We would both be indicted. And then the image played out in my mind like a horror movie. Police cars in the driveway, handcuffs clicking around my wrists. And then, the worst part, a social worker from Child Protective Services walking out the door with Leo. Leo screaming for me. Leo being placed in a foster home with strangers because both his parents were felons. I could not let that happen. I would rather die than let them take Leo. So, the logic went, I had to stay silent. I had to let Caleb win. I had to let him steal from us, abuse us, and laugh at us, just to keep my son safe. I opened the car door and walked up the stairs to my apartment. My legs felt like lead. Inside, the babysitter, a teenager from down the hall named Sarah, was watching television on her phone. He has been sleeping for an hour, she said, not looking up. He was crying a lot about his ear before that. I paid her with the cash I had borrowed from the tip jar at work, a loan against my future self that I did not know how I would repay. When she left, the silence rushed back in. I walked into Leo's room. The glow of the nightlight cast long shadows across the floor. I sat on the edge of his bed and looked at him. He looked so small. His face was pale, beads of sweat glistening on his forehead. He whimpered in his sleep, his little hand clutching the blanket. I reached out and brushed the hair away from his face. My hand was trembling. I am failing you. I thought, I am letting a monster destroy your life because I am too afraid to fight. Suddenly, Leo's eyes flew open. He did not wake up slowly. He woke up screaming. It was a high, piercing shriek of pure agony. He clawed at his ear, his body arching off the mattress. Mommy, it hurts. Make it stop. Mommy, I scooped him up into my arms. He was burning up again. The fever had spiked. Is sir? Baby. I am here, I whispered, rocking him back and forth. I am here, but he could not hear me. The pressure in his ears must have been excruciating. He thrashed in my arms, his tears soaking into my shirt. Mommy, please, he begged. I scrambled for the pain medication on the nightstand. The bottle was empty. I had used the last dose this morning. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through my chest. I had no medicine. I had no money to buy more until my shift tomorrow. I had a maxed out credit card that belonged to a toddler. I held him tighter, my own tears falling onto his hot cheeks. I sang to him a broken, off-key lullaby, trying to soothe the pain that required surgery, not songs. For 45 minutes, he screamed, and for 45 minutes, something inside me died, the part of me that was Zoe Miller, the timid waitress, the woman who signed papers to keep the peace, the woman who was afraid of lawyers and threats. That woman died in that dark bedroom. I looked at my son's face, twisted in agony, and I realized something profound. Caleb did not care if Leo suffered. Caleb did not care if Leo went deaf. Caleb did not care if Leo started his adult life in bankruptcy. Caleb was not a father. He was a parasite. And if I did nothing, if I stayed silent to protect myself from prison, I was no better than him. I was sacrificing Leo to save myself. The fear of prison remained, but it was suddenly eclipsed by a much larger, darker emotion. Saoyutinghaoling, dva, hatred, pure, cold, crystalline hatred. It was not the hot, flashy anger of a lover's quarrel. This was the cold resolve of a soldier who realizes there is no way home, so the only way out is through the enemy. Leo's cries began to subside into exhausted whimpers. He fell back into a fitful sleep, his breath hitching every few seconds. I laid him down gently. I kissed his forehead. I promise you, I whispered into the darkness. This stops now. I walked out of the room and went to the kitchen. I did not turn on the lights. I stood in the dark, staring at the street lamp outside. Caleb thought he held all the cards. He thought my love for Leo was a weakness he could exploit. He thought I would be a good little victim, terrified and silent, while he lived on a yacht bought with stolen money. He was wrong. My love for Leo was not a weakness. It was a weapon, and I was about to sharpen it. If he wanted to play with the law, we would play. If he wanted to threaten me with prison, fine, I would take that risk. But I would not go down alone. I remembered the look in his eyes when he mentioned the tax papers. He was arrogant. He felt untouchable. But every man has a weakness. Caleb's weakness was his greed. His weakness was his need to be seen as successful. His weakness was the very women he tried to impress. I picked up my phone. I did not call Caleb. I did not text him. Instead, I opened the search browser. I typed in a name I had seen on the boat contract. Then I typed in the name of the law firm Caleb used to work for. Then I typed in the name of the new girlfriend I had seen at the jewelry store. I was done crying. I was done begging. I walked over to the stack of unpaid bills on the counter and shoved them into a drawer. I would not need them tonight. Tonight, I needed a plan. I went to the closet and pulled out a shoebox from the top shelf. Inside were old photos, letters, and a few keepsakes from our marriage. I dug to the bottom until my fingers brushed against a small, metallic object. It was an old flash drive. Caleb had thrown it out years ago, thinking it was broken. I had kept it, intending to fix it one day, to recover some family photos. I plugged it into my laptop. The screen flickered. It mounted. I opened the folders. It was not just photos. It was a backup of his old work laptop. I did not know what was in there yet, but I would find out. I would go through every file, every email, every spreadsheet. I sat down at the table, the blue light of the screen illuminating my face. My hands were steady now. My heart beat with a slow, rhythmic thud. You want a war, Caleb? I whispered to the empty room, "You just got one." I was no longer the prey. I was the hunter, and I was going to burn his entire world to the ground, even if I had to stand in the ashes with him. The office of Arthur Jensen was located on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Chicago, far above the grime and the noise of the streets where I lived. The waiting room smelled of mahogany and intimidation. Everything in it was designed to make you feel small. From the high-backed leather chairs to the receptionist who typed silently on a keyboard that made no sound. I sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching a thick manila envelope against my chest. Inside was a cashier's check for $5,000. It was everything I had. It was the meager savings I had scraped together over 3 years. It was the money I had borrowed from my sister. It was the cash advance from my credit card. It was Leo's college fund, or what little there was of it. When the heavy oak doors finally opened, Arthur Jensen did not look like a savior. He looked like a predator who had grown bored with the hunt. He was a man in his late 60s with silver hair slicked back and eyes that had seen every ugly divorce in the city for the last 40 years. He ushered me in and sat behind a desk that was wide enough to land a plane on. He did not offer me water. He simply extended his hand. I handed him the envelope. He opened it, glanced at the check, and slid it into a drawer without a change in expression. $5,000 is a retainer. Miss Miller, he said, his voice gravelly and low. It gets you in the door. It does not guarantee a win. And looking at your file, a win is going to be expensive. He picked up the file I had sent him. He flipped through the pages, the text messages, the bank rejection letter, the photos of the boat contract. Your ex-husband is what we call judgment proof, Jensen said, closing the file. On paper, he is destitute. He has no income. His assets are hidden in his mother's name or shell companies. If we sue him for child support in family court, he will walk in with empty pockets, and the judge will order him to pay the state minimum. You will spend $10,000 on legal fees to get $50 a month. My heart sank. I knew this. I knew the system was broken. So what do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Do I just let him win? Do I let him steal my son's identity and walk away? Jensen leaned forward, clasping his hands together. The predator's eyes sharpened. No, we do not sue him for money. We go for the throat. We go for his freedom. He tapped the photo of the boat contract. Identity theft of a minor is a federal crime. Tax evasion is a federal crime. Structuring assets to hide them from the court is fraud. If we can prove these things, we are not talking about a slap on the wrist. We are talking about prison time. But the tax papers, I interrupted, the fear rising again. I signed them. He said I would go to jail too. Jensen let out a dry, cynical laugh. Miss Miller, that is the oldest trick in the book. It is called duress. You were a housewife who signed what her husband told her to sign. No prosecutor in the country cares about the wife who was kept in the dark. They want the mastermind. They want the guy running the shell game. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. But here is the catch. The boat contract is good, but it is circumstantial. The mother can claim she bought it. The debt on your son's credit report is bad, but he can claim it was a mistake or identity theft by a third party. We need more. We need a smoking gun. We need to catch him in the act of spending money he claims he does not have, or admitting to the fraud. He turned back to me. I can fight the legal battle, Zoo, but I cannot follow him around. Private investigators cost money you do not have. You are going to have to be the one to get the dirt, And it is going to get ugly. Are you ready for that? I thought of Leo screaming in the night. I thought of the empty medicine bottle. Sao yu ting hao ling. Gatu. Yes? I said. The days that followed were a blur of exhaustion and paranoia. My life split into two realities. By day, I was the waitress smiling at customers, refilling coffee, and dodging the pitying looks of my coworkers. By night, I was a ghost haunting the wealthy suburbs of Chicago. I would put Leo to bed, leave the baby monitor with Sarah down the hall, and drive to Caleb's mother's house. I sat in my car, parked 3 streets away, watching through binoculars I had bought at a pawn shop. It was freezing. The engine had to be off to avoid drawing attention. I sat there for hours, shivering, watching the lights in the big house go on and off. I took notes. 8 o'clock, pizza delivery. 9 o'clock, Caleb leaves in the black sedan. I followed him. I followed him to bars. I followed him to the marina. I followed him to the apartment of the blonde girl, Tiffany. It was soul-crushing work, watching the man who had destroyed my life living it up while I counted pennies for gas money tore at me. Every laugh I saw him share with a stranger felt like a physical slap, but the real tragedy was waiting for me at home. The phone calls started 3 days after the bank visit. They came from toll-free numbers, usually during dinner time. The first time I picked up, a robotic voice asked for Leo Vance. This is an attempt to collect a debt, the voice said. I slammed the phone down, my hands shaking. The next day, a human called. I am looking for Mr. Leo Vance regarding a past due balance on his Discover card. The man said, his voice aggressive and impatient. He is 4 years old. I screamed into the receiver. He is a baby. Stop calling us. I am just doing my job. Ma'am, the collector snapped back. The debt is valid. Someone has to pay. The letters started arriving too. Urgent notices printed in red ink. Final warning. Pre-legal action. They were addressed to my son, my innocent little boy who liked dinosaurs and peanut butter sandwiches, was receiving mail that threatened lawsuits. I gathered the letters one evening and sat on the floor of the living room. Leo was playing with his blocks nearby. He picked up one of the envelopes. Is this for me? Mommy? Is it a birthday card? He asked, his eyes wide with excitement. I felt like my heart was being ripped out of my chest. I snatched the envelope from his hand, perhaps too quickly. No, baby, I said, my voice cracking. It is just junk mail. He looked at me, confused by my reaction, then went back to his blocks. I looked around the apartment. It felt smaller than ever. The walls seemed to be closing in. The pile of debt notices was growing, a physical manifestation of the cage Caleb had built around us. I was drowning. The stress was eating me alive. I was not sleeping. I was not eating. I was existing on caffeine and hatred. One night, while I was parked outside a high-end club where Caleb was partying, I saw him stumble out. He was drunk. He was laughing with a group of men in suits. He looked so carefree. He looked like a man who did not have a worry in the world. I looked at the dashboard of my car. The gas light was on. I had $5 in my wallet. I gripped the steering wheel. I wanted to drive the car right into him. The thought was sudden and violent. It would be so easy. Just press the pedal. End it all. But then I thought of Leo. I thought of him waking up alone. I lowered my head to the steering wheel and sobbed. It was a silent, dry sobbing that hurt my chest. I was losing myself. The Zoe who believed in kindness, who believed in fairness. She was gone. In her place was this hollow, desperate woman sitting in the dark, stalking her ex-husband. But as I watched Caleb get into a taxi, leaving his car behind to avoid a driving under the influence charge, I realized something. He was sloppy, he was drunk, and he was arrogant. Jensen was right. He would slip up, and when he did, I would be there. The tragedy was not that I had lost my money or my marriage. The tragedy was that I had to become a monster to defeat one. I wiped my face. I started the car. The hunt continued. The cafe was called The Roasted Bean. It was one of those places where the coffee cost $6 and the baristas wore leather aprons. It was located in the trendy West Loop district, the kind of neighborhood where Caleb liked to pretend he belonged. I sat in the corner, nursing a black coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. I was not there for the ambiance. I was there for her. Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than Tiffany. She walked in at 10 o'clock sharp, just as her routine dictated. I had learned her schedule over the past week of sleepless surveillance. She looked effortless in her yoga pants and oversized designer sunglasses. Her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun that probably took an hour to perfect. She ordered an oat milk latte and sat down at a small table by the window, immediately pulling out her phone to check her reflection. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of adrenaline and fear. This was the gamble. If I was wrong, if she was truly loyal to him, she would call Caleb immediately. He would know I was stalking them. He would file the harassment suit. He would win. But if I was right, if Caleb was running the same script on her that he had run on me, then she was my only hope. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but I forced them to move. I walked across the room, dodging a man with a laptop, and stopped at her table. "Tiffany?" I asked, keeping my voice low and steady. She looked up. Her eyes widened behind the sunglasses. She recognized me instantly. Caleb had likely shown her my picture, painted me as the deranged, obsessive ex-wife who could not let go. She recoiled, sliding her chair back with a screech that drew the attention of the table next to us. "Get away from me," she hissed, her hand gripping her phone like a weapon. "Caleb told me about you. He said you were stalking us. If you do not leave, I am calling the police." I did not move. I did not raise my voice. I simply placed a manila envelope on the table in front of her. It was thin, containing only 2 pieces of paper. "I am sure he told you I am crazy," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "I am sure he told you I am jealous. I am sure he told you that his assets are tied up in complex investments and that he will pay you back for everything as soon as the liquidity issue is resolved." Tiffany froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. I had hit the nerve. I had quoted Caleb's favorite lie, word for word. I sat down opposite her, uninvited. "I am not here to fight you, Tiffany. I am here to warn you. I do not want to hear your lies," she said, though her voice lacked the conviction it had a moment ago. "He loves me. We are building a life together." "Is that why the lease on his new apartment is in your name?" I asked softly. "Is that why you are paying for the dinners? Is that why he drives your car while his sits in his mother's garage?" She looked away, staring out the window at the gray Chicago street. Her knuckles were white where she gripped her coffee cup. "He is having a hard time with his business," she whispered. "His partners screwed him over. He just needs a little time to get back on his feet." I tapped the envelope on the table. "Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2 hekje is groter dan. Open it." She hesitated, then reached out with a trembling hand. She slid the papers out. The first was the photo of the boat contract. $52,000, paid in cash. The second was a copy of the credit report I had run on my own address, showing a recent inquiry for a joint credit card application in the names of Caleb Vance and Tiffany R. More. She stared at the papers. Her face paled, the blush on her cheeks standing out starkly against her white skin. He bought a boat? She breathed. He told me he could not afford to fix the heater in his car. He bought it 3 days ago. I said, in his mother's name. And that second paper? That is an alert. He is trying to open a credit card in your name. Tiffany, without your permission, she looked up at me, and for the first time, the hostility was gone. In its place was a dawn of horrific realization. The sunglasses came off, revealing eyes that were red-rimmed and tired. She looked just like I did in the mirror every morning. He, Sao Yu Tsing Haoling, 2# is greater than he borrowed $4,000 from me last week. She confessed, her voice shaking. He said it was for legal fees because you were draining him dry. He said you were trying to take his son away. I reached across the table. I did not touch her, but I let my hand rest near hers. I am not trying to take his son away. Tiffany, I am trying to save my son. Caleb stole his identity. My 4-year-old boy is $15,000 in debt because his father used his social security number to live the high life. She covered her mouth with her hand, a small gasp escaping her lips. He is a monster, I said, and he is doing the exact same thing to you. He will drain you until you are empty, and then he will move on to the next girl. Unless we stop him. Tiffany stared at the boat contract for a long time. I could see the wheels turning in her head, replaying every excuse, every promise, every missing dollar. When she finally looked back at me, her expression had hardened. The naive girl was gone. A woman scorned sat in her place. What do you need me to do? She asked. The plan was simple, but dangerous. We needed a confession. We needed Caleb to admit, in his own words, that he was hiding money and that he had committed fraud. I gave Tiffany a small, digital voice recorder I had bought at an electronics store. It was no bigger than a pack of gum. He talks to his mother every morning at 8:30 on his drive to the gym, Tiffany said as we sat in her car later that afternoon. He puts her on speaker. That is when they strategize. Place it under the passenger seat. I instructed, tape it to the frame so it does not slide around, and pray he does not drop his phone and go looking for it. The wait was agonizing. 2 days passed. 2 days of silence. 2 days of me staring at my phone, waiting for Tiffany to text me the signal. Finally, on Wednesday evening, my phone buzzed. I have it. Meet me at the park. I drove like a maniac. When I arrived, Tiffany was sitting on a swing, the chains creaking in the cold wind. She looked exhausted, but triumphant. She handed me the recorder. He was in a good mood today, she said, her voice bitter. He thinks he has won. I took the device. My hands were shaking. This was it. This was the smoking gun Arthur Jensen needed. I plugged my headphones into the jack. I pressed play. First, there was the sound of an engine starting. Then, the rustle of fabric. Then, the distinctive sound of a car door closing. Hey, Ma? Caleb's voice filled my ears. It was loud and clear. Did you get the transfer? Patricia's voice crackled through the car's speakerphone. Yeah, it hit the account this morning, Caleb said. He sounded relaxed, arrogant. $10,000. That should cover the marina fees for the year and get the detailing done on the boat. Be careful, Caleb, Patricia warned. That lawyer of hers sent another letter demanding financial disclosure. Caleb laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. Let them send letters. I officially have zero income. Ma, I am a pauper. My bank accounts are empty. Everything is in cash or in your name. They cannot touch what they cannot see. I felt a surge of validation, so strong it made me dizzy. There it was, admission of hiding assets. But he was not done. What about the boy? Patricia asked. Zoe is claiming he needs that surgery. Zoe is a drama queen. Caleb scoffed. The kid is fine. She just wants money for herself. Besides, even if he needs it, I cannot show income now. It would ruin the whole strategy. Let her figure it out. She's the one who wanted custody. My stomach twisted. He was willing to let Leo suffer just to maintain his lie. And the credit cards? Patricia asked, her voice lower. Are you sure that will not come back to bite us? Using the boy's number, Sao Yuting Haoling. 2 hashes greater than that is risky. Caleb, I held my breath. This was the moment. Ma, relax, Caleb said, his tone dismissing her concern. He is 4 years old. Who checks the credit of a toddler? By the time he is 18, the statute of limitations will be gone, or I will have filed bankruptcy on it. It is free money. Why should not I use it? I gave him life. He can give me a line of credit. I pressed stop. I sat there on the park bench, the cold wind whipping my face, but I felt nothing but heat. I gave him life. He can give me a line of credit. It was the most vile thing I had ever heard. It was the confession of a sociopath. I looked at Tiffany. She was crying silently. He used my card to buy dinner last night, she whispered. After he said all that, I put the recorder in my pocket. I stood up and pulled Tiffany into a hug. It was brief, but it was fierce. He is done. Tiffany, I said, we got him. The next morning, I walked into Arthur Jensen's office without an appointment. The receptionist tried to stop me, but the look on my face made her think twice. I marched straight to his door and knocked. Jensen was on the phone. He looked annoyed when I entered, but he hung up when he saw me place the recorder on his desk. I told you I would get the dirt, I said. Jensen raised an eyebrow. He picked up the device. What is this? This is Caleb Vance admitting to bankruptcy fraud, tax evasion, and identity theft of a minor, I said, and he implicates his mother as a co-conspirator. Jensen's eyes lit up. The boredom vanished. He leaned forward, looking at the recorder like it was a diamond. He plugged it into his computer speakers. He played the file. We listened together. When Caleb delivered the line about the free money, Jensen actually smiled. It was a shark smile, cold, sharp, and terrifying. He stopped the recording. He leaned back in his leather chair and tented his fingers. Miss Miller, he said, his voice filled with professional admiration. You did not just get dirt. You got a burial plot. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. Get me the contact at the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. He barked into the receiver. And call the Federal Bureau of Investigation Field Office. Yes, we have a wire fraud case. And get the family court judge on the line. We are filing an emergency motion. He looked at me. Go home. Sui, get Leo. Pack a bag. The next 24 hours are going to be a storm. But when the dust settles, Caleb Vance will not be worrying about child support. He will be worrying about solitary confinement. I walked out of the skyscraper. The sun was shining on the streets of Chicago. For the first time in 2 years, the air did not feel heavy. I drove to the diner. I did not go in to work. I walked up to Mike, my manager. Kit, I said, Mike looked at me, stunned. You cannot quit. You need this money. Not anymore, I said. I walked out. I drove to the daycare. I picked up Leo early. Mommy, are you okay? He asked as I buckled him in. I am better than okay. Baby, I said, kissing his forehead. We went home. I made us grilled cheese sandwiches. We built a fort in the living room. I turned off my phone. I knew what was coming. The storm Jensen promised. The police raids. The arrests. The headlines. But for tonight, in the quiet of our fortress of blankets, there was no fear. There was only the calm certainty of a mother who had walked through fire and come out holding the sword. Caleb had wanted a war. He had wanted to crush me. He had wanted to erase me. But he forgot the one rule of nature you never break. You never corner a mother protecting her young. Tomorrow, the world would know who Caleb Vance really was. Tomorrow, he would pay the price. The movies always get the ending wrong. In the films, when the villain is handcuffed and dragged away, the music swells, the sun breaks through the clouds, and the hero drives off into a golden sunset with a smile. There is a sense of immediate, washing relief. Real life is not a movie. In the days following Caleb's arrest, the sun did not shine. It rained, a cold, gray drizzle that turned the Chicago streets into a slurry of mud and slush. And inside my apartment, the confetti did not fall. I sat at my kitchen table, not with a glass of champagne, but with a stack of paperwork that stood 6 inches high. The Federal Trade Commission, the Social Security Administration, the credit bureaus, the fraud departments of 3 different banks. Winning the war against Caleb did not magically erase the damage he had done. It just shifted the burden. Now, instead of fighting a man, I was fighting a bureaucracy. I had to prove, over and over again, that my 4-year-old son did not actually buy a flat-screen television or finance a trip to Las Vegas. I had to fill out affidavit after affidavit, swearing under penalty of perjury that Leo was a victim. It was exhausting. It was a slow, grinding process that ate up my mornings and haunted my nights. I looked at Leo, who was sitting on the floor, coloring in a dinosaur book. He was innocent. He had no idea that his name had been scrubbed through the mud of the financial system. He just knew that Daddy was gone. Where is Daddy? He had asked me 2 nights ago. I had frozen. How do you tell a child that his father is in federal custody? How do you explain that the man who was supposed to protect him had used him as a shield? Daddy had to go away for a long time. I had said, my voice hollow, he made some big mistakes, and now he has to fix them. Leo had just nodded, accepting the answer with the heartbreaking adaptability of a child who was used to disappointment. 3 months later, the sentencing hearing arrived. I did not want to go. I wanted to stay home and pretend Caleb Vance never existed. But I needed closure. I needed to see the period put at the end of this sentence. The courtroom was different this time. It was a federal court. The air was sterile. Caleb walked in. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit. His hair, once perfectly styled with expensive product, was shaved close to his scalp. He had lost weight. He looked small, but his eyes were the same. When he looked at me, there was no remorse. There was no apology. There was only a cold, a simmering rage. He still blamed me. In his twisted narrative, he was the victim. I was the vindictive ex-wife who had ruined his life. He truly believed he was entitled to that money, entitled to that boat, entitled to use us until we were dry husks. The judge was a man with a face like carved granite. He read the charges. Wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, tax evasion, money laundering. Mr. Vance, the judge said, looking over his spectacles, you preyed on the financial system. You defrauded the government, but most despicably, you preyed on your own flesh and blood. To steal the identity of a child is a coward's act. Caleb stood there, jaw clenched, saying nothing. I sentence you to 120 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $240,000. 120 months, 10 years. I listened to the number, and I felt Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than nothing. I did not feel happy. I did not feel vindicated. I just felt tired. A deep, bone-weary exhaustion that seeped into my marrow. 10 years was a long time, but it was also just a number. It did not give me back the last 2 years of stress. It did not erase the nights I spent crying on the bathroom floor. It did not fix the trust that had been shattered inside of me. I watched them lead him away. The chains around his waist clinked softly. He did not look back. I walked out of the courthouse alone. The reporters were there, flashing their cameras, hungry for a soundbite from the hero mom who took down a fraudster. I pushed past them. I did not want to be a hero. I just wanted to be Zoe. That night, after I put Leo to bed, I sat on my small balcony. The city lights twinkled in the distance. I thought about the woman I used to be, the naive girl who fell in love with Caleb's charm, who believed his promises, who signed his papers because she wanted to be a good wife. That girl was dead. Caleb had killed her. In her place was someone new, someone harder, someone who checked credit reports every month, someone who did not trust easily. I took a sip of tea. It was bitter, but it was warm. The scar on my heart was jagged and ugly. I knew it would never fully heal. There would always be a part of me that wondered how I could have been so blind. There would always be a fear that the rug would be pulled out from under me again. But as I looked at the moon hanging over the Chicago skyline, I realized something else. I was free. The phone was not going to ring with a debt collector. The bank account was not going to be drained overnight. Caleb could not hurt us anymore. The aftermath was messy. The cleanup would take years. But the storm was over. I stood up and went inside. I locked the door. It was a solid, heavy click for the first time in a long time. The silence in the apartment did not feel like a threat. It felt like peace. It has been 6 months since the gavel fell. The bitter Chicago winter has finally retreated, replaced by a tentative, blooming spring. The ice on the lake has melted, and the wind no longer bites. It breathes. I sat on a wooden bench at Lincoln Park, watching Leo chase a pigeon near the pond. He was laughing. It was a clear, bell-like sound that I had not heard in a long time. The tubes in his ears were working perfectly. The surgery had been a success. Paid for, not by his father's generosity, but by the federal government's seizure of his father's hidden assets. The Sea Ray Sundancer, the boat that was supposed to be Caleb's escape vessel, had been sold at a government auction 3 weeks ago, along with the seized contents of Patricia's safe deposit box. The proceeds went to restitution. I did not become a millionaire. I did not get a windfall that would let me retire to an island. The check I received from the United States Marshal Service was for $28,000. To some, that might seem like a small victory for 2 years of hell. But to me, it was everything. It paid off the $15,000 of debt on Leo's credit report. It paid the medical bills. It paid Arthur Jensen, and it left us with a clean slate, a zero balance. I looked down at the paper in my lap. It was the final decree from the family court. Sole legal and physical custody. Caleb had lost his rights. He would not be visiting Leo on weekends. He would not be making decisions about Leo's school or health. He was currently sitting in a federal correctional institution in Terre Haute, Indiana, earning 12 cents an hour, making license plates. Patricia had lost her home to foreclosure after the Internal Revenue Service liens were placed on it. She was living in a small apartment in Ohio with her sister, far away from the country club life she had desperately tried to maintain. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the smell of wet earth and fresh grass. I looked at my hands. They were still the hands of a waitress. I still had shifts to work tomorrow. I still had rent to pay. The struggle of daily life had not vanished, but the fear was gone. That was the real payout. The constant, thrumming anxiety that had lived in my chest. The fear of the next text message. The fear of the mailbox. The fear of his key in the door. It had evaporated. I realized then that I was not the same woman who had counted quarters on a kitchen table in the dark. That Zoe was naive. She thought love was enough to fix a broken man. She thought that if she was just quiet enough, compliant enough, the storm would pass. I knew better now. I had learned the hardest lesson a woman can learn. Financial independence is not a luxury. It is a shield. I would never again sign a paper I did not read. I would never again let someone else hold the keys to my life. Mommy, look! Leo came running toward me, holding a dandelion he had plucked from the grass. He held it out like it was a diamond scepter. It is beautiful, baby, I said, tucking it behind my ear. He climbed onto the bench beside me and leaned his head on my shoulder. Are we going to Disney World now? He asked, looking up with hopeful eyes. I smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached my eyes. Not today. Leo, I said softly, maybe one day, but today we are going to get ice cream, and then we are going to go home, and we are going to sleep without worrying about anything. He seemed satisfied with that. He jumped down and ran back toward the slide. I watched him go. We did not have the castle. We did not have the magic kingdom. We did not have the father he deserved. But as the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the park, I realized we had something far more valuable. We had the truth. We had our dignity. And for the first time in forever, we had a future that belonged entirely to us. I stood up, brushed the pollen from my jeans, and walked toward my son. The nightmare was over. The waking world was waiting, and I was finally ready to live in it.